Rain glazed the sidewalks as Lila Moreau tucked a loaf of day-old bread under her coat and checked the time on her cracked phone. Behind the grocery store, beneath a flickering exit sign, the beggar who called himself Rook cupped the coffee she'd bought with her last singles. He stood straighter than a man beaten by weather, eyes too clear for alley gloom, thanks gentle and precise. Poor single mother, beggar, billionaire, home. The very words that would later shock everyone here were already assembling themselves around the moment she said, "You shouldn't be out in this cold," and he replied, "You shouldn't have to spend your last dollar on a stranger," but took the cup anyway because pride doesn't heat hands. She told him about Micah, 9, an asthmatic who labeled popsicle stick bridges like a tiny engineer, about the rent-stamped final notice, about the inhaler down to its last rattle. She laughed at her own exhaustion because the alternative was crying, and Rook listened without rushing the way people don't anymore. When thunder rattled the dumpsters, he said, "Come home. Just for a hot meal." The word home made her shoulders rise. Home meant 2 bus lines away, a chain lock polished by fear, a sitter streaming cartoons on low volume while Micah drifted between breaths. 1 hour, she bargained, thumbs flying to text the sitter. "Heat the soup. I'll be right back." The poor single mother followed the beggar, unaware he was a billionaire, toward a home that would shock everyone, but she refused to believe she was doing anything except being practical. He led her through streets better swept than hers, past doors that breathed heat and planters that stayed green year-round. At a corner building of quiet marble and softer lighting, he keyed in, notched a nod from the desk, and moved like he belonged. Lila's scalp tightened. "You live here?" "Tonight," he said, and the elevator rose without a lurch. The hall smelled like lemon and new carpet. Inside the apartment, light pooled in a deliberate way, absorbing sound and returning it warmer. The kitchen was staged for living, knives all present in the block, a bowl of perfect oranges, a refrigerator that hummed in a confident baritone. Poor single mother instinct took inventory the way survival had taught her to do. A velvet square on a console cradled a watch too fine for alley life. A portrait down the hall caught light at a sly angle, a boardroom jawline beside a carved seal, and her mind filed it under questions for later. "Sit," he said. "Soup's a family recipe." He ladled carefully, sleeves pushed back to reveal wrists unscarred by street winters. Not a beggar's wrists, she thought, then shoved the thought away because suspicion doesn't feed you. She tasted. Rosemary bloomed against something richer that reminded her of pre-foreclosure Sundays, when the furnace still worked and the radio played old standards. Flashback flickered. Last anniversary dinner at a diner with neon stutter, her ex scrolling sports scores while Lila refilled his coffee because the waitress vanished. The memory's sour aftertaste dissolved under clean, herb-heavy warmth. "It's dangerously good," she said. He smiled in a way that struck a match in her ribs and said, "It's better with company." A phone vibrated somewhere deeper in the apartment, a bass note beneath the quiet. Rook ignored it. Lila noticed a glass door cracked to a dim office, leather chair, thick books, a painting like ocean at night. On the desk, a frame faced the wall as if hiding a face. Habit tugged her toward the room. Poor single mothers learned to read spaces fast, and a floorboard sighed beneath her foot. "Careful," he said from the kitchen. "That step's loose." It wasn't. Nothing here felt loose. She stopped at the threshold and asked, half joke, half plea, "Who are you really?" "Someone who lost the right things and is trying to earn a second look," he said, pouring tea, steam lifting like a benediction. It sounded like truth wearing a disguise. Lila checked her phone and exhaled at the sitter's picture of Micah asleep, fist curled around a model bridge. Relief softened the hard line between her eyes. She should go. She didn't stand. Rain gentled against the windows as if even weather were willing to wait. "I wasn't always outside," Rook said, watching her clock the room. "Sometimes you strip away noise to hear what matters." "Noise like doorman?" she said, testing the edges. He took the tease without flinching. "Noise like reputation." The word rang through the apartment. She looked again at the hallway portrait, at the curve of a carved seal that teased familiarity. The doorman's almost name pressed against her memory, asking to be let in. The lock clicked. A woman in a dark suit stepped in, trench speckled with rain. Her gaze slid across the velvet-cradled watch, the pot on the stove, the poor single mother at the counter, and settled into polite neutrality. "Good evening, sir," she said, choosing a title instead of a name. The board advanced the vote. Your 9:30 is now 9:10. Lila's spoon stilled. Board. Vote. Sir. The words rearranged the furniture of the night. Rook's calm slipped a fraction, then retook the field. Tell them I'm on my way, he said. The woman's eyes returned to Lila, quick with curiosity and a subtle human flicker of approval that said, You're not what they expected. She left with a nod that felt like a stamp. Silence returned, carrying citrus and rain. I should go, Lila said. Micah is safe, Rook answered, glancing at her screen like a man who understood that safety was the only true luxury. Stay 10 more minutes. Let me show you why I asked you here. He crossed to the office, lifted the face-down frame, and turned it. The photo showed him in a tux beside a carved seal. The headline beneath the glass read, Aurum Capital Names New CEO. Her breath snagged. The alley, the coat, the coffee, the costume. You're a billionaire, she whispered, not as accusation but as stunned inventory. Not to you, he said softly. Not if I can help it. He set the frame down as if it could bruise. Shock folded into anger, then into something stranger. Curiosity. Why the ruse? Why me? He looked at her like a man finally reading a market that wasn't lying. Because when a poor single mother gives away warmth she can't spare, you learn what wealth is for, he said. His phone pulsed again, insistent. He slid on the velvet-kept watch, rolled down sleeves that never should have been wet, and nodded toward the door. Come with me. See what home means to a man everyone thinks they know, and decide if you still want to be part of it. Rain kept time on the awning as Rook guided Lila through the lobby toward a car that did not belong to any beggar's life. A low sedan idled at the curb, paint like still water, driver at attention beneath the rain's silver threads. Home, Rook said, and the door opened as if the word were a key. Poor single mother falls in love with a beggar unaware he's a billionaire. Now the billionaire was taking her home, and that alone would shock everyone. But Lila guarded her breath like cash. She tipped the sitter again, money she could not spare, and slid into leather that smelled faintly of cedar. Rook watched her read the dashboard clock the way an accountant reads margin. We won't be long, he said. Micah stays first in any room. It wasn't flattery. It sounded like policy. The car glided past wet storefronts reflecting streetlights like jittering charts. Flashback cut in. The night her ex left, muttering about luck and leverage, carrying their savings jar and the hush that followed. She had taped over the hollow by learning schedules, coupons, inhaler refills, and how to sleep with one ear open. Why the alley? She asked. Why meet me there as a beggar if you're a billionaire with a board and a driver? Rook's profile cut against the city's sheen. People audition for wealth, he said. I wanted to meet someone who auditioned for none of it. He turned. The dome light iced his eyes. You looked at me and saw a person, not a problem. That's rare. Pride and fear both warmed her chest. And you, she said. What did you see? A builder, he answered. Someone who chooses yes to life when no would be cheaper. They passed iron gates into a courtyard where hydrangeas cupped rain like pearls. The townhouse door opened before they reached it, a man in a charcoal sweater nodding as if this were ordinary. Welcome home, he told Rook, then to Lila. May I bring tea? The word home made her hesitate. She had a home cramped in hers. This one carried hushed money and the gravity of decisions. Tea, please, she said, steady because poor single mothers learn to perform steadiness when the ground tilts. Inside, photographs choreographed a climb. A boy gripping a ribbon, a teenager shaking a mare's hand, a man in a tux beside a woman whose smile missed the eyes. My mother, Rook said. She scrubbed houses on Grant Street, taught me to read balance sheets aloud because numbers don't lie if you ask good questions. He tapped a frame where a younger him carried a paper route bag. I learned margin counting tips. They passed a long table strewn with term sheets and a map pinned with colored thread. Its center glowed around a block where storefronts blinked vacant. Aurum is buying that block, he said. Cheap if we're cruel. Fair if we remember who we could be. He studied her like her reaction might alter the math. Housing over shops, daycare over fear. Come see the model. In a back room, a scale city glowed. Tiny street lamps haloing roofs. On one roof, raised letters spelled daycare. Lila's breath caught. She pictured Micah's chest easing under clean air. A place where breathing wasn't a gamble. Rook noticed. Hospital-grade filtration, he said softly. I know what nights sound like when a child can't catch breath. She swallowed. How? He touched a photo she hadn't reached. Him, younger, hunched over a nebulizer, a woman's hand on his shoulder. I've been the kid who wheezed through gym. Wealth didn't erase the memory. The admission unlatched something inside her that had braced since the elevator. A staffer brought tea and butter cookies arranged like coins. Lila laughed at herself for counting them. I'm not buying you, Rook said, catching the glance. I'm asking you to tell me when I forget what money can't replace. A phone buzzed. Another board update. He ignored it, a choice she filed under character and risk. Why me? She asked again. Because you didn't flinch, he said. Not from rain, not from me, not from the truth. He poured tea, steam rising like a curtain before a play. One more room, then I'll drive you home. He led her to a door with a frosted pane and pressed a code. Inside, a workshop waited. A 3D printer, popsicle sticks in labeled bins, a poster of bridges. You said Micah likes to build, he said. I built this for a kid who needs a place to think with his hands. Emotion moved through her like a warm tide. Behind it, caution sharpened. This is a lot, Lila said. It is, he agreed. And it's early. I want to earn the right to help. He paused. Tomorrow the board votes on that block. If I push, we close fast. If I pause, we negotiate better. The poor single mother inside me, which you woke, says we do it right. Will you come tell a room full of wealthy people what fairness sounds like? She remembered every time a landlord called an increased market, every ER bill stamped urgent, every bus they ran to catch in thin-soled shoes. I'm not a public speaker, she said. You speak every day, he answered. You speak with choices. Let them hear you. He handed her a visitor badge. It looked like paper. It felt like a small, portable future. Lightning stitched the evening. Somewhere, a camera shutter ghosted against the glass, paparazzi learning a new address. If a poor single mother walks into a billionaire's home and then into his boardroom, it will shock everyone. But what will it do to Micah's quiet life? What will it awaken in people who think love is leverage? Take me home, she said at last. To my home. Then yes, tomorrow. Rook nodded, relief uncoiling from his shoulders. The car eased back into rain. Lila texted the sitter. 10 minutes. She rested her forehead against the cool window and watched the city slide past like a ledger closing for the night. Beside her, a man who had been a beggar and a billionaire in 1 hour folded his hands as if in prayer. Morning arrived the way good news rarely does. Quiet, uncertain, with coffee steam rising like a promise she couldn't afford to believe. Lila dressed Micah in a navy sweater he'd outgrow by spring, tucked his inhaler into the front pocket of his backpack, and kept repeating the words she never said out loud. Poor single mother. Beggar, billionaire, home, shock everyone. The words had become a rhythm she couldn't shake, a drum line beneath the ordinary. You sure you don't have to work the early shift? The sitter asked, gathering puzzles into a plastic bin. I'm visiting a friend's office, Lila said, failing to find a word big enough for boardroom and small enough for comfort. Back by noon. The sitter squinted like friend was a shapeshifter and shrugged. In the hallway, Micah checked his model bridge with the solemnity of an engineer signing off on a span. Will the new daycare have air filters like spaceships? He asked. That's the plan, she said, smoothing his hair while her lungs remembered nights counting his breaths. Promises are heavier than they look, kiddo. He considered this and nodded as if she'd said gravity was real. The ride downtown felt like standing in two lives at once. On one side, bus routes, clipped coupons, a grocery inventory living in her head. On the other, a car that smelled like cedar and a man who wore false poverty convincingly enough to test her heart. Poor single mother falls in love with a beggar unaware he's a billionaire. Today that sentence had to meet daylight. If he takes her home again, will it shock everyone or just the people whose lives are steady as stone? She stared at her reflection in the window and saw a woman who'd learned to pass for invincible. Orem Capital's building held itself like a held breath, all glass and restraint. The revolving door nudged her into a lobby that echoed and hushed at the same time. Rook waited in a slate suit with a tie the exact blue of a sky that never threatens rain. The sight startled her as much as the alley had. You look like a different language, she said, startled into honesty. He smiled. I could say the same. You look like someone about to move markets. He offered a badge. She clipped it to a cardigan that had weathered 3 winters and a dozen laundromat cycles. You don't have to speak, he said as the elevator sighed upward. Just be the truth in the room. The boardroom was longer than her apartment and twice as bright. A wall-sized screen displayed a map of the block he'd shown her model of, the vacant storefronts pulsing like injuries. Men and women decorated seats in fabrics that cost as much as her rent. A silver-haired director tilted her head, appraisal disguised as welcome. You brought a guest, Rowan, she said, using the name the doorman had almost spoken. This is Lila Moreau, Rook said, letting her name take its full space. She lives the consequences of our spreadsheets. There was a reaction, quick and small, as if the word lived reminded them numbers could breathe. A woman with a legal pad asked about acquisition terms. A man with a watch like a moon asked about the return. Rook answered in clean sentences that skimmed jargon's surface but didn't sink. Profit is the floor, he said. Reputation is the roof. Community is the walls. We can build all three, or we can build something that won't survive weather. He nodded at Lila. And here's the weather. Heads shifted. Lila felt her pulse in her back teeth. Poor single mother. Beggar. Billionaire. Home. Shock everyone. She stood because sitting felt like hiding. I'm Lila, she said, hearing her voice loosen the room. I have a kid who breathes like a violin sometimes, thin and brave. We run in the mornings to beat the bus, and we run at night to beat the bills. She told them about the daycare that closed when the landlord raised the rent, about the ER pediatrician who said, if only the air were better. About nights she made a game out of layering blankets. She didn't ask for pity. She offered a ledger of consequences. If you build cheap, you teach us we're cheap, she said. If you build right, you teach us we're worth the math. Silence handled her words gently like a glass too fine to set down hard. A skeptical director leaned forward. And what should right look like from your seat, Ms. Moreau? Lila looked at the map. Filters. Sliding scale daycare slots reserved for parents who work nights. Shops that trade in basics before luxury. Because it's the basics we cross town for. Benches under trees so we can wait for rides without pretending we don't need to sit. Security that knows names without making us feel watched like suspects. And rent caps that won't turn a birthday into a moving day. She sat breathless, not from fear but from the rare relief of being heard in a room designed to ignore women like her. Rook watched the directors the way she watched price stickers, attentive to the smallest shift. We can stage acquisitions differently, he said, sliding a revised term sheet across the table. Partner with a nonprofit on daycare. Offer equity to shop owners instead of just leases. Tie executive bonuses to tenant retention. The silver-haired director lifted a brow. That would be unusual. Unusual is how markets move, Rook said lightly, but Lila saw the muscle flicker in his jaw. He was spending capital you could not tally in money. The vote called itself to order. The room performed its ritual. Motions, seconds, recorded eyes. When it cleared, the block belonged to Orem under terms Lila could say out loud without tasting metal. Applause didn't fit. Instead, there was a murmured assent that sounded like weather changing. Rook didn't look at her. He looked at the map, as if checking that the world had consented. Then he turned. Lunch? He asked, casual as a Tuesday, fierce as a promise. She felt suddenly light, like the half-second after a roller coaster crest. I have an afternoon shift, she said, because poor single mothers live by shifts. Dinner, then, he replied, and the word home braided itself into the airway of the day. On the elevator down, a woman with immaculate hair and a perfume that remembered gardens stepped in and paused. Her eyes took Rook's measure like history, and then slid to Lila with the speed of a stock ticker. Rowan, she said, voice velvet over wire. You've upgraded your philanthropy to +1? Rook's shoulders held still. Elise, he said. We're not doing this in an elevator. Elise laughed, the sound sweet and cutting. We always do it in elevators. It's how we ended, remember? The doors opened. She stepped out, turned, and let a look fall like a needle. Beggar, billionaire, home, shock everyone, watch me sting. Lila recognized the glance. She had worn it the day she signed the pawn ticket. Who was that? She asked when the doors slid shut again. My ex-wife, Rook said, not dressing it up with context. Also a director at Orem. Also someone who thinks I confuse business with conscience. Outside, flashes popped. Paparazzi or curiosity tourists. Lenses sniffing for confirmation that a poor single mother had walked into a billionaire's morning. Rook's security shifted to create a quiet tunnel. "This is the part where headlines try to turn a person into a plot," he warned softly. "If this is too much." "It is," she admitted. "But also, what if this is the price of the daycare? Of air Micah can breathe?" He looked at her like a man reading his own reflection in a different language and finding the syntax better than remembered. They ate soup in a corner bistro where waiters learned not to hover. Rook asked Micah's favorite science facts and laughed at the one about bridges singing in the wind. Lila didn't ask about Elise or the tux in the photo. She asked about the paper route and the house on Grant Street that taught him margins. "My mother kept a jar," he said. 3 labels: rent, food, pride. Pride paid for small gifts we couldn't afford. Birthday pastries for neighbors who forgot joy. She said pride is not ego. It's the moments you refuse to be only what the world says. Lila thought about the cup of coffee in the alley, about the way she gave because she refused to be only poor. Late afternoon, he walked her to the car that would take her home, with its chain lock and its window that stuck in humid months. "Tonight," he said, "I want to cook for you and Micah. No boardrooms. Just a kitchen. You can say no." She pictured Micah at a long table with filtered air, building a bridge that would not fall. "We'll bring dessert," she said, "but it will be from the discount rack." He grinned. "Good. Those taste like victory." As the car door swung, a shadow detached from a column. Elise again, a phone in her hand, eyes bright with purpose. "Just so you know," she said to Lila, voice silk over ice. "Men like Rowan build worlds and forget to label the exits. Don't mistake a key for a cage." She slipped a card into Lila's palm, her number, the Aurum logo, a handwritten line. "Call me when you remember what silence costs." The car pulled away. Lila held the card like a match she refused to strike. Micah's sneakers tapped a shy rhythm on the marble as he stepped into a kitchen that could feed a small army, eyes everywhere at once, trying to decide if this billionaire home was a museum or a playground. "Do we touch stuff?" he whispered. "We touched dinner," Rook answered, sliding a cutting board forward, sleeves rolled, apron on, the beggar gone, but not the gentleness. Poor single mother, beggar, billionaire, home shock everyone. The words hummed like the fridge's steady baritone. Lila set down a grocery bag from the discount rack. Day-old lemon cake, bruised strawberries, the good kind if you cut away the story. And she forced her shoulders to drop. This was dinner, not an ambush. A kitchen, not an interview. But the door camera blinked red like an eyelid that never sleeps. And the house had a way of reminding you who owned it. Rook handed Micah a chef's knife no bigger than a butter spreader and showed him how to rock the blade. "You build bridges," he said. "I build recipes. Same idea, structure, balance, load-bearing flavors." Micah's smile cracked wide. Lila watched the boy who had memorized the city bus schedule by age 8 follow a billionaire's hands through garlic and rosemary. Watched the beggar's listening translate into a father-shaped patience she wasn't ready to name. The air smelled like hope dressed as roasted chicken, and for a dangerous second she pictured holidays here. Paper crowns, too loud laughter, Micah's cough an artifact instead of a threat. Flashback jolted her. Last Thanksgiving at their apartment with the heater thumping like a second heart. Canned gravy, a neighbor's knock carrying borrowed pie and gossip about rent spikes. Hope is a door that swings both ways. It can admit joy and grief in the same breath. He kept it simple. Pan-seared chicken, green beans that snapped like good decisions, potatoes whipped into clouds. Micah asked if billionaires ate the same food as regular people. "Mostly," Rook said. "Sometimes worse," Lila snorted. "How do you mean?" "Money can make you forget salt," he said. "It replaces it with garnish. Looks nice. Tastes like nothing." He sprinkled a pinch that looked like restraint and slid the skillet into the oven. "I don't want that life anymore." He didn't say since you. He didn't have to. The room said it for him. The doorbell chimed a polished note. Rook glanced at a wall tablet, jaw tightening. "It's the building manager," he murmured. "And, Elise." He wiped his hands, paused at Lila's side. "Do you want them in your evening?" Poor single mothers rarely get to curate intrusions. She inhaled. Pictured Micah's badge-sized pride at slicing strawberries. Pictured the daycare model, the board vote, the card in her purse that read like a threat disguised as advice. "Let them in," she said. If we're doing this, let's not pretend we're hiding. But her fingers laced tighter around a kitchen towel as if the cloth could absorb anxiety. Elise entered carrying a bottle with a label that assumed everyone knew it. She wore a white blouse sharp as a contract and a smile that never touched her eyes. "I come in peace," she said, which is what people say before they set the table for war. The manager hovered, apologizing about increased foot traffic at the service entrance. Paparazzi sniffing, neighbors murmuring. "He'll install a privacy screen," Rook said, then turned to Elise. "One glass," he warned. "We have a guest with school tomorrow." Elise's gaze finally acknowledged Micah, curious, not cruel, and settled on Lila as if measuring fabric. "So you're the headline," she said, pouring. "Poor single mother, beggar boyfriend turns out to be billionaire, takes her home, shock everyone." "It writes itself." Lila kept her voice flat. "Then don't write it." Elise's brows rose. Rook hid a smile that might have been relief. The manager retreated. Elise stayed. "You've got the press humming," she told Rook. "Investors, too. They adore a redemption arc until it asks them for returns measured in more than yield." She dipped a finger in the cooling gravy, pronounced it real. "The board approved the block," she added, tone neutral. "Our lawyers adore the equity language because they get to bill for it." She looked at Lila. "You moved him," she said. "Congratulations." "Few do." The compliment carried a barb. "Enjoy influence while it's new." Lila said nothing. Silence is its own kind of math. Dinner did what dinners do when people want different outcomes but use the same utensils. Micah narrated a bridge that collapsed in a wind tunnel because of resonance. Rook turned it into a metaphor about designing structures to sing instead of shatter. Elise turned it into a memo about reputational risk. "If your home becomes a stage," she told Rook, "you'll start performing love. And performance has a half-life." Lila cut Micah's chicken smaller and tasted the line between warning and jealousy. "Some performances save lives," she said quietly. "Our nurses performing calm. Teachers performing certainty. Parents performing we've got this." Elise lifted her glass, conceding the point with a clinical smile. After dessert, Rook carried dishes to the sink with the eagerness of a man used to delegating away the therapy of warm water. Lila joined him because old habits don't bow before marble. The faucet hissed like steam from a morning product launch. "This is dangerous," she said under the noise. "Not because of you. Because of everything around you." He nodded, hands steady under suds. "I know we can move slow." "Slow won't save us from headlines," she said. "But it might save us from lies." A tablet on the counter lit up, an alert from a finance blog, then a gossip site, then a local channel. The Chiron was cruelly efficient. Beggar billionaire's new love. With a photo taken outside the bistro, a poor single mother in a cardigan that had survived laundromat standing under a billionaire's awning. Micah leaned toward the screen, voice small. "Mom?" Lila thumbed it dark and pulled him into the ordinary. Dish towel, jokes about whipped potatoes, the universal ritual of sending a kid to brush his teeth in a strange bathroom. "2 minutes," she said. "Don't flood the place." He dashed off, obedient and buzzing. Elise watched Rook watch the hallway where Micah vanished. "You never wanted children," she said, not quite a question. "I never wanted to pretend I did," he answered. "There's a difference." She considered this and nodded once, as if filing an amendment she had no intention of arguing. "Rowan, the board will tolerate your experiment until it rains on returns. Choose your weather wisely." She set the bottle down and softened, just enough to feel human. "Lila, I don't dislike you. I just don't believe in fairy tales that start in alleys, but I do believe in the cost of keeping promises." She left in a low breath of perfume and expensive doubt. Micah returned in socks, hair damp from sink splashes, proud of his clean teeth. Rook crouched to eye level. "Engineer check," he said. "Did you learn anything new about structures tonight?" Micah nodded. "That gravy needs a stable base." Rook laughed with his whole face, the laugh of a man who remembers hunger and chooses flavor. It was a laugh that might anchor a life. But Lila caught the privacy alert blinking again. An email ping with a number she didn't recognize. A text from a neighbor. "You okay? TV says you're famous." Her throat tightened. Fame was the opposite of safe. When Rook drove them home, the car's quiet carried different weight. He offered them a spare phone on his plan, a black card she didn't touch, a security detail she rejected. "Let me be ordinary tonight," she said. Let my son sleep under our noisy radiator and dream normal dreams. He nodded, but his eyes held a question he didn't dare ask. If love requires safety, how do you love a man whose presence attracts storms? In the stairwell of her building, someone had tacked a flyer for a missing cat. Lila smoothed its curling corner and listened to their footsteps climb the familiar echo chamber of thin walls and thicker stories. At the door, she looked back at the street where a shadow might be a reporter or just rain practicing its fall. Tomorrow, she told Rook, we live our ordinary. But if ordinary cracks, you don't get to decide alone how we fix it. He lifted a hand as if to touch her cheek, stopped, and saluted instead. Respect disguised as restraint. Dawn arrived like a held breath, and by 9 a.m., the story had outrun the truth. A van idled outside Lila's building, a lens long enough to steal privacy through curtains. The neighbor who'd texted fame last night now texted worry. 2 men asked which floor you're on. Lila pulled Micah's hoodie over his curls, slipped the inhaler into her pocket, and weighed the cost of stepping into a day that kept saying poor single mother, beggar, billionaire, home, shock everyone as if repetition could turn a family into a brand. When Rook called from the curb, his voice carried something she hadn't heard before. Not certainty, not strategy, petition. Give me an hour, he said. No marble. No headlines, just home. She almost said no. Then she remembered the missing cat flyer and the way Micah had whispered, maybe the cat found a new home where it can breathe. She locked the door, kissed the key for luck, and led her son past the camera that pretended to be a lamppost. The car smelled like cedar again, but Rook wore a gray sweater, no watch, no tie, no arm seal. If the board calls, he said, they can wait, not downtown. Not the townhouse. He steered toward Grant Street, where porches leaned like old friends and hydrangeas survived on neighborly buckets. They stopped in front of a 2-story row house with a new coat of paint and an old soul. A woman in a bright headscarf swept the stoop like she was polishing memory. Mrs. Alvarez, Rook called. She shaded her eyes, broke into a smile that erased 30 years. Row, she exclaimed, folding him into the hug reserved for boys who once hauled her groceries up the stairs. You disappeared into those suits. Didn't think you were the type to bring a family back to a block party. Lila felt the word family hang in the air like a question answered in advance, and decided to let it be. Inside, the house smelled like Flower and Sunday. The walls held photos of kids' soccer teams, church bulletin boards, a graduation cap looped over a nail. This, Rook said softly, is home. He ran a hand along the banister, a gesture so tender it made Lila ache. My mother used to count tips on this step. Rent, food, pride, he quoted. On winter nights, neighbors came in just to warm their hands around the kettle. He opened a cupboard to reveal jars labeled like his mother's. Rent, food, pride. Only this time, they were full. We kept the house, he said. Put it in an irrevocable trust so it can't be sold off to the highest bidder. A community land trust holds the deed now. Governance, KPIs, all the jargon. Beneath it is this: nobody gets priced out of their memories. He turned to Lila, hands empty, eyes steady. When I took you to the townhouse, I took you to a stage, he said. When I take you here, I take you to a spine. He crouched until he and Micah shared a horizon. Kiddo, want to see something cool? He led them to the back room where a small air unit hummed with the soft insistence of a lullaby. Hospital-grade filtration, he said. Prototype. Mrs. Alvarez's grandson has asthma. The boy, 8, gap-toothed, appeared as if summoned and offered Micah a stack of Lego beams. In minutes, the boys were making a truss, arguing friendly physics. Micah breathed easier without thinking to check if he could. Lila watched his chest and felt a fear she'd slept with for years loosen one greedy finger. The doorbell rang. Lila tensed for paparazzi. Instead, neighbors filled the hall. Mr. Chen from the bodega, the nurse from down the block, a pastor with sleeves rolled, 2 teenagers with skateboard scuffs. Word, it turned out, traveled on better networks than gossip sites. Rook stepped onto the stoop and spoke without a microphone. Aram bought the block, he said, but we don't own the soul of it. So we're doing something rare in corporate law, placing the daycare and a third of the housing units into a community equity vehicle, profit sharing, rent caps indexed to local wages, seats on our project board reserved for residents. We'll take a smaller financial return because I want a larger human return. The lawyers have their fun. We have our home. Phones rose, but not like weapons. More like pens at a citizenship ceremony. Mrs. Alvarez dabbed her eyes. The pastor said amen in an accountant's cadence. Lila saw Elise at the corner, not sweeping in to stop him, not smiling either. She filmed, arms folded, the specific posture of a woman who will not be accused of standing in the door. Later, Lila would get a text. I still think you should be careful. But today, Elise let the weather change. A cat leapt from under a car, the calico from the flyer, and rubbed itself against Micah's shins as if to confirm the house's credentials. The boys cheered like a small market rally. Rook laughed, light breaking from cloud. Bring her inside, he said. Every home needs a skeptic with whiskers. Rowan, a voice called, slick as rain on polished stone. A local news van had found them. The anchor's smile practiced empathy the way actors practice accents. Can we ask, are you turning the beggar narrative into a brand? Is the poor single mother your latest ESG initiative? People want to know if the billionaire's home is just another investment vehicle. The question canned itself into a sneer. Rook didn't take the bait. He offered the mic to Lila. People, she said, feeling the hum of the filter, the warm press of a cat against her ankle, want air their children can breathe and leases they can sign without packing a suitcase. She held the anchor's gaze. I fell in love with a beggar because he listened like a neighbor. He turned out to be a billionaire, but I'm here because he brought us to a home that remembers names. If the cameras need a headline, make it boring. CEO uses escrow to protect block. Poor single mother demands governance, not charity. Kid builds bridge and it holds. She handed the mic to Mrs. Alvarez. The anchor, caught between spectacle and substance, chose, reluctantly, substance. Behind them, a small procession rounded the corner. Construction crews in hard hats, a city councilwoman with a rolled plan set, a legal aid lawyer carrying a folder labeled CLT, Community Land Trust. Rook watched them like a conductor counting entrances. We signed the documents here, he said, on this stoop. Elise stepped forward then, eyes flint and water. Make it clean, she said. Record the deed transfer. Put the daycare escrow in a segregated account. Publish the term sheet. If we're going to shock everyone, let's shock them with compliance. He almost smiled. Deal, they signed. Witnesses initialed. The councilwoman announced permits. The legal aid lawyer explained the CLT in plain language. Neighbors clapped the way humans clap when they can imagine next year for the first time in a long time. Micah lifted the calico, who submitted like a diva accepting applause. The air unit hummed, a quiet metronome for a different future. When the van finally pulled away, when the anchor had what she needed, when the street returned to itself, Rook looked at Lila with a question that was not, do you love me? But the only one that mattered. Can we build a life where the headlines can't reach our pillows? She thought of the townhouse cameras, the bistro awning, the elevator with Elise's shadow. She thought of the trust deed, the daycare filter, the row house banister smoothed by years of hands. Yes, she said, and her yes was conditional, negotiated, real. But we do it like this, on stoops, at tables, contracts and casseroles. We write down the rules we live by, and when they try to turn us into a brand, we hand them a budget and ask them to itemize love. He laughed, then sobered. We'll mess up, he said. We'll fix it in daylight, she nodded. Poor single mother, beggar, billionaire, home, shock everyone. The words no longer sounded like a hook. They sounded like a map whose directions were simple. Build, breathe, belong. That night, after Micah fell asleep on the couch with the cat draped like a scarf and an inhaler untouched on the table, Rook tucked a blanket over him and whispered, I never thought home could be this loud with other people's joy. Lila eased beside him, their shoulders finding a grammar that made sense. Noise like this, she said, is the opposite of loneliness.